That's right, everybody. It's another episode of We Know Severance here on RHAP. We Know Scripted TV. We Know Severance.com. That's where you want to go to subscribe to the pod. And today we are talking about the 5th episode of season 2 of Severance, Trojans Horse. I want to be very clear. It is a horse belonging to Trojan that we are talking about on the pod today. And some say that the We Know Severance podcast itself is a Trojan's horse to educate all of you on the various aspects of the brain that you never knew about, courtesy of my wonderful co-hosts, Dr. Amanda, Dr. Melissa. Dr. Melissa, have you ever heard of a Trojan's horse before?
No. So I have heard of a Trojan rabbit.
Yeah.
For all your Monty Python fans out there, but it's I know of a horse that was given to Trojans, but not a.
I don't know Trojans.
Yeah, this
horse.
is a different one.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Trojans horse, Amanda? Have you ever ridden this thing?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to answer that question because I'm a little concerned, Josh, that you might be Glock-shoopening us. I think I see your royal vestments peeking out from under that very cozy cardigan you're wearing.
Let's be clear. I have made a career off of Glock-shoopening people. This is what's kept the lights on in my house for that and nepotism. But those two things, the Glockenspieling has also helped quite a bit.
Glockenspieling and Glock-schupen.
Yes. We are officially halfway through Severance Season 2, folks. It took 3 years to get here. It's taken 5 episodes and 5 weeks to get to the halfway mark of Severance Season 2. But we shall not be sad about that yet. And instead, we will be taking this time. Amanda, I think it's time to give Severance Season 2 a performance review.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to ask us to give 9 seconds of silence in honor of this episode of
Severance. That gets cut out on a lot of podcatchers.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I do think, there are a lot of big words. Let's be real. I do have to say that is an area where Severance Season 2 could potentially catch some flack. Lots of big words.
Yes.
I don't know about the paperclip placement. That I can't really speak to, but I think that Severance Season 2 is off to a really strong first half. I have to say, this is my favorite show on television right now. And when I say right now, I mean over the past 3 years that we have been involved in Severance, it has been one of my favorite shows, and I love it. And I'm really excited that we have it on our screen and what we're getting to learn in terms of getting deeper into the mystery of this world. I want to honor that I do have a bit of trepidation at this point in the season about whether certain things are going to be as effective for me as season 1 was. So to be completely honest, putting that on the table in the spirit of a performance review. And I continue.
So we should give this show a performance review.
I mean, I think that's fair. I think it's fair.
We do every episode. This is sort of an ongoing performance review is podcasting.
Yeah, and I'm glad we get to break for lunch because it does sometimes it takes a long time.
Here's the menu.
I put my order in already. Yeah.
Well, we'll break it down. If perchance you may allow us to colloquially employ, I can't even say it, to employ a few words about this episode. We would love for you to colloquially employ a few words to us by sending in feedback to our feedback line, Severance, RHAP @gmail.com. That's Severance, RHAP @gmail.com for our upcoming theories and feedback show next week. It'll be a day or so late for a very good reason. We have a very special bonus podcast for all of you this week. The doctors Amanda, Melissa, and also Josh got together with friend of the pod, the great Michael Chernus, Ricken Laszlo Hale himself, swung by the We Know Severance podcast studio to talk about the show and what's going on with Ricken. So we'll have that podcast out for you in a day or two, and then we'll have the feedback and theory show. So 3 Severance pods here in the mid-season stretch. Lots of really fun stuff. Always a blast, Melissa, to check in on. I want to call him Dr. Turnus. Is he? Can we make him a doctor of something?
Sure, an honorary doctor of I don't know, acting.
Because also Turnus doesn't work.
Also Turnus, no, the great Michael Turnus,
the great
Michael Turnus.
Yeah. No, it was so lovely. It's so awesome to get to chat with him because he's got such a it's such insight into Ricken as a character. Like, you can tell that he really cares about Ricken and sees his value and his, all of the things that make him lovable, at the same time being very open to the fact that Ricken's getting the wool pulled over his eyes a little bit right now. And so what does that mean about our boy? And, how is he susceptible to Lumon in this way? So I think, it's great to chat with him, and I loved it.
So keep an eye out for that. But for now, we must giddy up and hop aboard Trojan's horse to talk about this 5th episode of season 2, where a lot's going down. It's not just a performance review. There is some reviewing of Helena's performance as Heli that goes on in this episode. If I'm to give a performance review to Dylan, my performance review would say something along the lines of "hang in there," as indeed. We were the greater Severance community nailed that right on the head. Lots of really fun stuff to talk about in this episode. Lots of dangerous stuff, as well as the reintegration story is continuing. Irving B might be dead, but outie Irving is still out and about. So we've got more John Turturro on our screen, which is great. A lot happening. Let's talk it through. Amanda, where should we start?
Well, we can start with the very opening of this episode. And we are in Lumon's halls, where we see there is an older man whose face we do not see, who is walking through the halls, whistling a very specific tune on his way to O&D to pick up something from Felicia and one of her O&D co-workers. A tray that looks something like dental tools, and he takes these and continues on to that testing room hallway, which Felicia called the exports hall, and brings them to the elevator, and we hear that ding. Now, Melissa, I know that you did some research on this tune that is being whistled by the faceless Lumon employee.
I mean, I had to do no research. I recognized this tune instantly, as should most Canadians. This is the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, written by the great Gordon Lightfoot, and it is memorializing the sinking of this big carrier, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, back in 1975. So, but this is just the Canadian folk song. This is the most popular Canadian folk song in existence, I think.
Wow.
But the really interesting thing about this song is that it is basically been also adapted to the song Back Home in Derry. So our Irish listeners might have recognized this as a completely different song.
Oh, wow.
It's an Irish rebel song written by Bobby Sands when he was imprisoned and went on hunger strike. So there was, and it was also covered by Christy Moore, and it's basically this talking of, anyway, so it's kind of the song that's got these two different meanings. And while I think that the version, I again consulted with my in-house Irish folk song expert, that this version being hummed is the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, but this is kind of an important song that there are maybe two versions.
Ooh, an innie and an outie version?
Yeah, one of which is very about the spirit of rebellion and kind of all of this all around kind of the Irish conflict of the 1800s and 1900s. So I think that it is very interesting because I don't totally understand thematically where the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald would fit into this show and why that would be the Easter egg that we get. But Back Home in Derry to me fits much better with the themes of this show. But I think the fact that there are sort of these two twin versions of it may be important. Also, side note, this is Petey, right? It looks like Petey. That's my thought.
It looks like Petey. Wow. I didn't think it necessarily looked like Petey, but I'll go back and watch it. I did take note that we are very clearly obscured this individual's face. And the fact that this is somebody who is whistling, drawing attention to themselves, like this seems like somebody that we're supposed to take note of. I think that we're certainly supposed to take note of the tune that this person is whistling. So I imagine that the face of this person will be somebody of consequence that will either mean something to us right now as viewers or will mean something later in the series. So I have to imagine that this was intentional and that this is somebody of consequence. What do you think, Chet?
Petey would be great because I would love to see Yul Vasquez back on the show, and I think it would also be compelling in the direction of the Miss Casey and Gemma of it all to like see another cadaver up and about. And is that would, I mean, if that's Petey, it would mean one of two things to me, that either like Gemma died and they somehow brought her back to life, or clones are back on the menu.
Clones are back on the menu.
A Robo PD, I guess, is possible. But I'll have to go back and watch. I bet this is going to be a big subject for the Reddit detectives and certainly on our delayed feedback show this week.
Awesome.
So would love to get the takes from the peeps.
Yeah.
But we have we've got a spooky elevator situation that we're looking at here. Exports.
Exports.
What are we exporting here? Are these tariffed exports here?
Oh no!
Is that why we had a Canadian folk song?
We are charging Melissa now to get on this.
Is this
to get on the podcast?
Is Canada PE the 51st state?
Oh, gosh.
So this tray that the gentleman is carrying, these appear to be like dental instruments.
Yeah.
I thought about the mouth wall.
Yeah. My mother was a dental hygienist. She has all of these. So yeah, it was definitely dental tools, which again, very strange, but also, the hatchets and the watering cans and the who knows, right? There's all sorts of weird stuff going out of the exports.
So if we imagine that there are people somewhere down there on this testing floor in the exports hall, maybe they're getting dental work done. I don't know. Maybe these are the mouths of the mouth wall. But this is our sort of cold open, if you will, which leads us right into the opening credits. And we pick up our action in Outie Mark's apartment, where he's taking a variety of pills from a pill box that I have to say, I don't like how this pill box is organized, because instead of
it's
each
crazy.
bin being the day, like your regimen for the day, they seem to be sorted by pill, which is like, how is that helping you?
Yeah, that's chaos. It's absolutely barbaric behavior. I'm so not cool with this.
You're supposed to just put your pills for the day in the box of the day, right?
That's how I would recommend doing it.
I just want to make sure I've been pillboxing right.
Because
honestly, it would make a lot of sense if I've been doing it wrong. So much sense. Mark is going to tell Devin that he's in pain because his innie fell off a rope. That's a very believable Lumon lie. Sorry, my innie was doing a ropes course. And he fell.
Yeah, some detail about what the cover story was for the Ortbo from last episode. Devin asked about his weekend thing, but Mark is like a little bit deflecting with Devin. She wants to know about how his like little retina trick is going. He kind of pushes that away and says, "Oh, I can't do it long enough. Like, what's the plan now?" And he has to go. We see that Mark has a refrigerator filled with these small jars containing some kind of very like viscous beige liquid.
like
Yeah.
milky something. Yeah, I had no
Mhm.
idea what was going on with any of
Well,
this. I was like, is this all
it seems like it's all part of
from?
like the reintegration routine, right? So like what would he
Yeah.
be drinking to like ease that process along? Is there anything like during like brain surgery that this would be useful for?
There are some like nutritional supplements that have been used for post-concussion recovery that, are just in general, I don't know, like electrolytes or whatever kind of things are good for hydrating you. I think that we're meant to believe that this is some part of the reintegration process, these pills that he's taking, also the
Mhm.
solution that he's drinking, whether like this would, Melissa and I had a lot of good time geeking out about transcranial magnetic stimulation, but there's nothing that I know of where you would want to supplement that with a particular pharmaceutical regimen or with some kind of nutritional supplement. But clearly, this is part of Ragabi's method, which she has now refined. Ragabi is there. And, she's continuing to work with Mark on this, and he's eager to continue doing these reintegration sessions. And Ragabi is, seems to be pushing back that they're going to take it slow. This was something that is depicted in the opening credits, so we're getting some of these little credit clues, like the goat room, and
Yeah.
now his nutritional drink. We're also going to see the Irving
Goat
face
milk.
mug. Maybe it's goat milk.
Never know.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, the pills were also kind of like blue, like one of them was in kind of a blue black capsule thing that seemed kind of luminy colored, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, very much on the color theme. Mark complains that he hasn't remembered anything else, but Ragabi tells him maybe your innie has.
Mhm.
She's onto something
Mhm.
because that's definitely occurring for any Mark. But before we go to any Mark, we stay with some outies, specifically Helena.
Mhm.
Helena, who's going to have a sit down with Natalie and Drummond. Big Drummond episode. Big week for Mr.
Yeah.
D.
Yeah, if we were speculating about whether Drummond was some kind of like bodyguard or he was an attendant to Helena, Drummond seems to have a lot of power in his own right.
Yeah. He seems like it seems like it's more than just body, like multi hyphenate status, right?
Yes.
Like singer, songwriter, bodyguard,
Mhm.
COO. Like I don't know, right? Like there seems to be some other higher authority that he has here based
He
on the
has
Milchich
more
review.
access to Jaime than Helena does, we
Right.
learn, because
Yeah.
this is the aftermath of obviously Helena being almost murdered by Irving via a very aggressive pineapple bobbing / waterboarding incident. And she, wants to come back to work and serve Kier, as we all do. And she says like, well, will I be updating father later? And Drummond says, no, we've decided to spare him knowledge of this contretemps. She makes a face and says, well, just let him know that his daughter's alive and well. Um, they're going to encourage Helena to go back to
Yeah.
the MDR floor.
She does not want to go back there. She does not want to go back in. She said, Natalie says, it won't be you, it'll be your innie. And she says, my innie who tried to kill me, and then the other one who tried to kill me, they're animals.
Mhm.
So that's how
Yeah.
Helena's feeling about all of this. If anyone hoped that she was like getting any kind of warm feelies, fuzzy feelies from Mark and from any of these other people on this little field trip that they had, sorry, Helena does not like MDR at all, and she really has to be
Yeah.
convinced to let this go through.
Yeah. And understandable, right? I mean, and you have to think about, we don't really know the backstory of how it was decided that she was going to go down there as a severed employee to begin with. We speculated a little bit when we first met Jaime Egan in the finale of season 1, and we find out that, when Helena had that, that attempted self-harm situation, that he didn't seem to find out about it right away, and certainly hadn't seen her or attended to her in any of the time since then. So we imagine that they might have somewhat of a tense or a strange relationship, but for whatever reason, she was put in this situation to go down to the severed floor, and now she's being put back there again. And this is seemingly against her will, right? I mean, she goes along with it, but you get the impression that this is not a family or a company that gave her a lot of options.
Yeah. My sympathy for that goes only so far, I have to say. And I think it's
fair,
it's a tough look at Helena, even with all of that as potential context. It's like, you're a grown adult, so it's hard. It's tough. I think, she ultimately is going to go forward with it, but it's because the board appreciates your sacrifice, right? Like the board is really pushing for this. So I think, like, in the category of, is there a board as a question, there is at least something called the board that Helena believes in and obeys, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this was an interesting moment for any kind of board speculation.
Yeah. What do you think, Melissa? Do you have any sympathy for Helena in this situation?
I mean, not really. When you refer to real people as animals, I think you kind of forfeit all right to sympathy in that way. But because it's interesting to me, because it sort of seems to imply then that Jaime Egan is not the board, right? Like the board is sort of up to date on what's been happening, but they're not telling Jaime about it, which is, I was sort of under the impression that if there were any sort of like real people to the board, that Jaime would be a part of that. But it seems like there's a separation there, which is interesting. Sort of makes sense that the board, and a typical like board of directors would be different than your CEO. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting, and maybe again further speculating like who is the board, and is it brains in jars or something? I have no idea.
And leaving the Dieter Egan of it all and the AI generated of it all, one thought that's coming to mind for me is like, are these some like AI generated Egans are the board? Like, is the board some sort of artificial intelligence? Is like newly on my mind.
Yeah, very possible.
I want to, and I do want to note that I think it's really interesting that we hear Helena refer to the innies as animals, and the first question that Heli has for Mark is, am I livestock? So it's kind of this echoing of this kind of worldview where the innies are not considered people in the same way.
Yeah. I also thought it was wild, this like, Drummond says the medical team says your tempers will like realign. It's just that this is such a, Lumen hasn't like the tempers are not seen as like this metaphorical understanding of that we have like moved past or anything. They're still just like very present in how Lumen conducts its business, which is crazy for a company that is focused on scientific advancement, right? That we're still, I don't know. Yeah.
And it's also interesting, Melissa. I thought this was really interesting, but because it suggests that this is like an actual belief and view that Lumen holds, and not just some kind of mythology they've created for the innies to control them, that this is actually something that maybe they believe. Drummond also refers to scheduling an obligement session for Helena. So we've noticed that the innie world is like so bizarre, and this sort of suggests that within Lumen, even at the absolute top of the power hierarchy, people are still believing these things and kind of conforming in the same way. We get a little bit of that with the Milchich performance eval too.
Right. Well, I don't want to say that like you have to be a true believer to be like this level of shitty, because I think that you certainly can just like grift your way through it and like say that you believe a thing and not actually believe a thing and just be out for whatever agenda you're out for. But I also do think that like operations like Lumen Industries only work if at least members in power, like people in power, does not have to be all people in power, but it has to include people in power, that some of them at least are true believers, right? And so
Yeah.
I think like there's a world where like we're looking at some of these people who are true believers in this totally ridiculous nonsense that does not make them any less dangerous. It may like make their like ethos and the things that they are trying to combat, it may like highlight those things as childish and ridiculous. And this is really what you're after, and this is really what you care about, does nothing to negate the danger. So like they could be like infantile and horrifying at the same time. And I think that that's some of the vibe from Drummond specifically for me in this episode. He is scarier than Gruner for sure. Not even close.
So Helena is going to oblige, despite foregoing the obligement session, and she's going to go back down to the severed floor as an innie. We see her in the elevator transforming into Heli, and I loved this scene because I feel like instantly this is the gut check of like, oh yeah, this is what Heli acts like. Helena wasn't really doing a perfect job. And she comes down, she's immediately sort of caught in that sense of panic and arrest from having just experienced the situation with Irv, and immediately is greeted by Miss Wong and has the reaction that everybody has to Miss Wong. Who the hell are you?
Who the hell are you?
What the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what the hell being the next question. I feel like that's the second most important question for sure when it comes to Miss Wong. But she's going to escort her to Milchich's, where Mark and Dylan are waiting to have words with Milchich as well. And we get into it. We pick up, right where we left off from the Ortbo. All of that drama gets picked up with Milchich with why was he trying to drown me? And Dylan says, because you're an effing Egan. And so Heli's, the cat's out of the bag on Heli, and she doesn't have any opportunity to like tell her side of the story or own her story because that's been taken.
Yeah, and she's got a lot that she's missed out on too by in the intervening time between when she was that last there. Everybody is equally as outraged with Milchich about the events of the Ortbo. Mark is really concerned. He doesn't seem to trust that this is actually Heli, and how could he? He wants to know if she was spying on them. And Heli is offended. She's horrified. She's saying that like my outie was down here as me. She talks about stealing her body and her identity, and really seems to be horrified by this betrayal.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me because it took me a little bit to remember what Heli would know in this situation, because it took me a minute to realize that the lying about being an Egan was obviously Helena. And so like we don't know if Heli would have been upfront about that or not, but we don't really get the opportunity to learn that. And then obviously that Heli doesn't know about Miss Casey. And so, it was just interesting to me to realize that from Heli's point of view, she was there at the gala. Then suddenly she was like being held by Irving, and then suddenly now she's back. Like these have all happened in quick succession. And so I had to like readjust to the idea of what does Heli even know here and how she's reacting to everything that has happened. And I think it makes so much sense that she's really upset by this, that it feels very upsetting that someone was impersonating her, right? That sort of the rules of their world of, okay, down here were the innies, out there were the outies, has been violated. And that's not really the case in this situation.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, this like meditation on personhood and like, and the kind of like ownership of the body and the self. And like, I think that this episode, and even, when they have Irving's funeral, really underlines just how complicated it is for these innies to feel like they have a right to anything. Like they don't get to have consent over being on the severed floor and doing the job they do. They don't get to have knowledge of their past. They don't get to make choices about their future. All they have is who they are in this very specific, limited context. And for Helena to take that from Heli is like such an awful betrayal. And she is horrified at this. And Mark is as horrified and traumatized by this as she is, seemingly, because he was betrayed in this situation. Dylan is principally concerned about Irving, as they all are, and he demands to know where Irving is. Milchich explains that his outie has departed on an elongated cruise
An elongated cruise voyage. So don't worry, Irving is fine. And Dylan says, I don't give 3 dry Fs about his outie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is where Milchich explains the story of the Grachschuppen. I looked this up, and there is no evidence of this being a thing on the internet.
What a phenomenal moment where he's just where he says, "Have you ever heard of the Grachschuppen?" And Mark says, "Let's assume we haven't."
Yeah, we were trying to figure out if this was like actual Swedish or German or something like that, but it didn't seem to be. So yeah,
it's beautiful coming out of Jamel Tillman's mouth, though.
Indeed.
I have to say it is.
Yes. So what it's in ancient times, the king of Sweden himself would go incognito amidst his people in the hopes of learning their true grievances. He would don an old gray robe, a Grachschuppen, the name for which he was remembered, to disguise his royal vestments. Keir Egan was known to do these as well, and Helena Egan is carrying on this normal tradition. And luckily, we are halfway into season 2, so no one's buying this bullshit anymore.
No one's buying it.
Immediately, smells like Swedish horseshit, and Irving is still dead.
Yeah, I love Milchich ends this conversation by just announcing this went well, taking them back to MDR. But they're returned to their cubicles. The usual kind of quad arrangement where Irving had a desk has been rearranged, and now they have the triangular structure for 3 desks, which is immediately offensive to Dylan and Heli. The group photo of all of them has had Irv photoshopped out of it. He was
brutal. It's as if, I guess that's what Milchich had said. It'll be as if you never existed. And so that's the effort. But short of wiping their memories, which maybe they can do, they can't really do that. So it's very brutal the way that they've they're not even going to have any kind of send off for the people until they really insist on it. And he's like, okay, fine, a retirement party. He said, no, a funeral.
Dylan demands a funeral.
Remember the time when they told us that we should be grateful for the fact that that things like death don't happen at Lumon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I love this. If you're taking feedback, I hate it.
It's just I hate it.
How I would like to deliver feedback in the future.
Yeah. Heli and Dylan really want to have this funeral for Irving, and Milchich agrees, but Mark is more reluctant. He says as long as it's quick so it doesn't take up the whole day. This was an interesting episode. While there still is a line between innie Mark and outie Mark's memories, I would say that innie Mark and outie Mark's dispositions have become much more fused, with innie Mark now having kind of the same jaded, world-weary heaviness that we've come to know about outie Mark. We also noticed that Mark is coughing, which we will remember Petey was also coughing quite a bit when he was undergoing the reintegration.
Yeah. So maybe some actual physical sickness occurring at this stage. So Ragabi said she figured it out. Hopefully,
maybe Petey wasn't drinking his viscous fluids.
Yeah, you need to have your morning beige.
Oh my gosh!
Can't get your day started without a morning beige. But I wonder, Melissa, what do you think of how much is this reintegration is starting to show up for innie Mark versus like innie Mark earning the sour disposition through experience, right? Like I think like
Yeah.
you could say you could go either way, and maybe it's a porque no los dos situation.
Yeah, it probably is a bit of both, but it was definitely my interpretation of this when I was watching that this is how Mark reacts to big
Yeah.
emotional events, regardless of what they are. And so this sort of betrayal, this feeling of having been tricked and having this, very intimate moment for the first time in his memory, and then having it be twisted like that. So I think that I think that you're right that they are becoming more similar, but in my view, it was like, this is why we've seen why Mark has ended up this way, more so than just the two of them being fused. But I think you're right. It's probably both.
Yeah.
Mark retreats into the bathroom to collect himself, and Heli knocks on the door. She wants to know if he's okay. Mark says, not really. Heli's like, yeah, this is seriously effed up, and, wants to know more about what happened while she was gone. You couldn't tell it was me. Mark says, obviously not. Heli asks what she would like, and Mark says, well, like you, or you're like her. I don't know. I don't know who you are, I guess. And Heli, it's so fascinating to think of these two characters as just being in different places in their relationship trajectory. Heli is the one who just kissed Mark, got on an elevator, realized she was an Egan, had about 20 minutes to deal with that, and then woke up with her head underwater and is back on the floor again. And she feels like we're a team. We're fighting this fight together. Let's continue doing this. Whereas Mark has felt this intense betrayal. And it from somebody who not only wasn't who he thought she was, but was actually the worst person that you could imagine her actually being. And Heli's still coping with the fact that her outie is Helena too. She insists, yes, you do know who it's me. It's not my fault that my outie hijacked me. And like Mark just says in this totally dissociated way, yeah, no, I totally get it. It sucks.
Yeah. It's striking to me that Mark has been living his life for days now, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours since the overtime contingency. And for Heli, like meeting that guy in the bathroom in this moment who's been on the other side of the wake up call for how long he's been. Heli has been awake right now probably for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like the timelines are like, they're just like ships passing in the night. Like that ship left like days ago, there's ships trying to catch up with each other, or at least Heli's trying to catch up to Mark's. And it's just so sad because it's so unfair, but like this show does such a great job of underlining under these like very bizarre circumstances of the premise of the show, why both of them would be feeling the way that they're feeling right now.
And I want to say that the dialogue and Adam Scott's performance for Mark is like every avoidant boyfriend like you've ever had. Like I feel like it's so pitch perfectly like, oh yeah, no, totally get it. It sucks. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. It doesn't matter. Like this it's really a little understated, but I feel like it's so spot on. I really enjoyed this from Mark here. He says, Heli asks, like, what happened to you up there? Mark says it doesn't matter. Heli asks, do you want to hear what happened to me? Mark says, no, I don't. Let's just try to forget it. Okay. And I think that this is really a moment where I said, yeah, like Heli would have told them what happened up there. She would have been eager to tell them. She would have said, this is really effed up and you're not going to believe it, but this is what happened. Let's take these mother effers down. Like that is absolutely the Heli that we know.
Yeah. And, from Heli's perspective, right, she went up there and she told a room full of people what was happening to them. And that's what she would want to share. So, yeah, it was interesting because it's like, in retrospect, all of the debate about Heli versus Helena and the telling of it, that it's interesting of like, oh, we do probably have a pretty good idea that Heli would have been on board and not see, because she sees them as different, she would not have been ashamed to admit that, because that's not her, that's somebody else. And so it's easy to say like, yeah, my outie, who we all hate, including me, is a bad person, but that doesn't reflect on who Heli is.
Milchich and Wong are working on the bereavement kit, which we learn is a banner printed on a dot matrix printer. And I am old enough to remember what it was like to peel those runners from the side of your printer paper on the banner. Yeah, there's a vending machine where we see mugs with each of the MDR team's faces on them. And they're getting all of this ready for Irving's funeral. Miss Wong kind of pushes back and says, I thought bereavement events were for innies who die on the floor. Which one? Ouch. That happens. That's a thing that happens enough.
That's what I wrote in all caps in my notes. Like, bereavement events for death on the floor. And the fact that all of these mugs are pre-made with all of their faces on them.
Right.
Wild. Yeah.
Do we imagine that they had a bereavement event for the original O&D team after the original MDR team disemboweled their bowels?
Probably.
That was a lot of mugs, Josh.
It's a lot of mugs.
Yeah. That's why they pre-print the mugs now. Is
they're like
such a run on mugs.
Backed up, everything got delayed. It was a mess.
Yeah.
And, Milchich defends himself. The affections index for Irving B was in the high 60s. It will help the others to grieve. And I think, bump that up. 80s, 90s.
Well,
I don't know what scale this is, but I think higher.
Is it a percentage?
I think the affection score for us is very different than it might be on the floor. Even sometimes Dylan is going to say really nice stuff about Irving, but sometimes they didn't all seem to get along so well. So maybe it's
he put the dick in contradiction.
Yeah, so it's not exactly totally unfair as far as that goes, but the existence of the scale is so messed up. Yeah, I was really taken by this scene because of the interaction, the tone of the interaction between Miss Wong and Milchich. I don't know if either of you felt this way, but it felt to me in watching that Miss Wong has there was a level of superiority with which she was communicating with Milchich, which made me wonder if that's just another she's wise beyond her years, people sort of character note, or what was the importance of that? Is she a much bigger deal than we know? Is she a CEO's kid or something like that, right? Is there some sort of reason why she is located here and is able to immediately just stand right up to Milchich? She wasn't allowed to play her song in a few minutes. She's going to be upset about that. And that felt punitive in a way that you would be punitive towards a person who's in more power than you in life, but in this specific job, it's let me remind you who's in charge. So the dynamic between the two of them from this episode got a lot more complicated for me in a good way. I think it's very intriguing to me.
Yeah, I agree that it's definitely on the floor, Milchich is her superior, but it definitely feels like Miss Wong has a level of power over Milchich, and whether it's just that, she has some sort of direct line to report on Milchich's goings on and is keeping an eye on him for somebody, or what is going on here. I agree that it is interesting and complicated, and Miss Wong seems very bought in to the Lumon of it all, right? Milchich is willing to sort of bend some of these rules to keep the innies happy, and Miss Wong's
cool boss. He's the cool boss.
Yeah. This is a little bit of Milchich's terrible, horrible, do good, very bad day. And I agree that I like this interaction, and that it suggests that Miss Wong has some history with Lumon. She knows that, the rules very well. And she also is, is comfortable being critical of him and is kind of paying attention in this way. So I thought that was really interesting. And she pushes back on this decision to have the funeral because she says it makes them feel like people. First, she asked permission to ask a question, and then Milchich says that wasn't a question, that was an opinion. And Melissa, I'm sure as somebody who's given an academic talk, you've probably had this experience where somebody says they're going to ask a question. It's like, actually, it's more of a comment. Oh boy. But Miss Wong also uses this moment to point out that Milchich's first performance review is today. And there's something a little bit menacing about this. Milchich looks nervous. And you wonder, Josh, given that you raised this question of power dynamic, like how much of this performance review is coming from info that Miss Wong might be feeding back up to the board?
Yeah. So it's like, I think that some of it has to come from, I guess,
just observing the show that has transpired.
Some of it is just like no effort required to say the last stuff that Drummond says, right? Like all that just very visibly happened. But the other stuff does feel like, who's filing those complaints?
Like the paperclip complaint, like, I mean, that could
wild.
And I don't know when my boss has a performance review. That's not my knowledge necessarily. Correct. So interesting that Miss Wong is taking note of that and keeping tabs on that.
So I would buy her as the narc for sure, but also as somebody who's maybe been placed there with some level of authority too.
We're gonna go to the break room for Irving's funeral.
Aww.
Very sad. There's one of the great kind of like 16-bit computer graphics animations of Irving on a television monitor, and
they can really turn that around.
Yeah,
no problem.
They really do. Very impressive. And after 9 seconds to silently remember Irving and thank Keir for our time with him. And of course, it's so Dan Erickson to pick 9 seconds instead of 10. Dylan is going to give the eulogy, and it's very, very Dylan and very, very touching. It's hard to pinpoint a favorite Irving story. For the least fun guy in the world, he was really fun.
Yeah.
A little sugar with Dylan's usual salt, as Milchich would say.
Yeah.
Zach Cherry is just on one this season. He's been so good all season. This scene is really, really wonderful.
Yeah. Miss Wong is going to bring out refreshments. Milchich encourages them to partake in Irving's fruit head. His black hair is courtesy of the Black Beauty watermelon from the country of Malaysia.
The Black Beauty watermelon.
Is that a real thing? I meant to look that up. I'm going to have to look that up now.
A Black Beauty watermelon, it does exist.
Okay,
it is
there you go.
It's a Black Beauty, but does it originate in Malaysia? I'm not sure. That I don't know. But they did like bust out like the big. They got the big melons on this one.
The big melons.
Yeah, they bring them out for the retirement, right?
Look at the size of the melons on this bereavement event.
And the banner I thought was very notable that it's quarter 870 to quarter 882. Like they don't talk about years, just quarters.
Keeping time in quarters, which is like, of course, and they want to distort the amount of time that they're down there. We know that they lied about 5 months transpiring, so they couldn't use any kind of actual anchor of real time. Miss Wong starts to play the theremin, but Milchich summons her to the hall because the theremin works best in moderation.
Which is very funny.
Yeah. It is so creepy. The Irving head. The watermelon Irving head is just like, what a ghoulish funeral.
Well, this is like a stand in for the actual body during, I mean, they don't do this for retirement parties, right? There was no Burt melon head.
No,
I remember
there was watermelon, but I don't remember
there was watermelon, but it was not brought to his black hair was not brought to us by the Black Beauty watermelon of Malaysia. So I do think it's meant to stand in for a viewing in this really morbid way. And we see Dylan eating the ear portion of Irving's face, which looks pretty gross.
The watermelon or the face?
I think that the idea of a very like juicy, like dripping
Yes.
watermelon that is shaped like a human ear is inherently unappetizing.
If it was October and you ate that, would you feel differently because it's like kind of Halloweeny?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Mm.
maybe that would be okay. I mean, yeah, maybe that would be
But I
okay.
think that most funerals, at least the ones that I've been to, have not had any snacks that
Watermelon.
resemble human body parts.
Right,
No,
right.
yeah. I think that would be considered in poor taste.
Although, like, if Miss Cobell needs to go in with the power drill and retrieve something from the inside of that
Sure.
watermelon, then that would face a lot less resistance than a human skull. So,
Yes.
pros and cons. Heli approaches Dylan, asks if he's okay. They're talking, and Mark is ready to go. He has to get back to work. Heli and Dylan seem like a little disappointed. And Dylan tells him to tells Heli just let Mark go, but Heli wants to know why Mark doesn't seem to give a shit. Dylan asks, like, hey, have you two caught up yet? Did you tell her Miss Casey's your wife?
Yeah.
And Heli's like, what? No. And Marcus just says, well, yeah, my Audie's wife, but sure. Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy. And leaves abruptly. Heli runs after him.
Yeah. This scene in the hallway is a great Heli scene. We've had so much great stuff from Britt Lower all season, but like here we get Heli. And Heli basically doing like the exact opposite of a Helena conversation of her saying like, I am a person. I'm not an animal, basically. Like just like saying the exact thing that she had said topside. And like the Heli kicker, like Melissa, if we didn't know that it was her before, the kicker is, and stop being an effing asshole. Like in the middle of like a true point, and like that's how she talks to Mark. Like, right, that's Heli. That's the person you come to know.
Yeah, and I thought it was so the insight into Mark's mindset here of the sort of like sense of despair I think that he's feeling of he's saying like they're smarter than us, they know everything, all of it, they know everything we're doing because Helena told them everything we're doing. And so I think that like while outie Mark is working on this plan, innie Mark is feeling like everything that they have done up until this point has been worthless because like they're aware of all of it and they are just these like rats in this maze that is being controlled and manipulated. And I think that he is very understandably sort of very beat down by Lumon at the situation where sort of I think the one thing that I think he thought he could trust in, he no longer can. And that's devastating.
Melissa, are you familiar with Marty Seligman's learned helplessness experiments with dogs? This is like a very terrible experiment, but this is like a very good metaphor for what the innies are experiencing, and Mark in particular. To create an animal model for depression, there was this experiment that was set up where dogs were divided into groups, and one group received electric shocks that they could control by pressing a lever so they could make it go away. Group 2 received identical shocks but had no control over them. And then the third group had no shocks. And the dogs that had no control over the shocks gave up trying to escape, even though escape was possible. They just developed this profound sense of helplessness. And this was designed to be a model of what depression is, which is like this learned behavior of giving up the will to fight and escape and strive. So, very, very sad that they did this experiment on dogs, but it's an extremely influential model of depression. And that seems like, we've talked about how the innies are kind of like these lab rats. They're being experimented upon. And just when Mark and the other innies, like they had all of this hope and they had developed this plan and they were fighting, and Mark realizes that the only thing that he knew he could trust, which was his comrades, is now something that he will forever doubt, because he could look at Dylan and not know, is that really you? He'll never be able to trust that Heli is Heli again. And that really seems to be the kind of behavior that he's now exhibiting. And I think that that's why he looks so familiar to what we have seen from outie Mark, who is obviously in a profound state of depression as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were sort of similar animal models used with mice in like a pool of water, and it was sort of this like whether or not they had like a platform that they could go and stand on, or whether or not they sort of gave up. And yeah, it's like a very tragic idea, but it's sort of this really interesting, informative study of like how we understand the mindset of depression. And I think you're right. I think it's such a good example of this, like what we know now about innie Mark and outie Mark. And I thought it was interesting that like Helena's response here, or Heli's response here, is not everything here is a lie. Like some things are real, and Mark doesn't know if he believes that anymore.
Yeah. So we move from this to Milchich's performance review. And before we get into his performance review, which is quite lengthy and you might want to order lunch right now, Milchich asks for a word with Natalie before they go in. This is a very, very interesting scene, I think, for me. What Milchich says to her is, the paintings, I want you to know that I'm grateful for them. If they're a measure of appreciation, then I accept that appreciation. I was just wondering if you could share with me how you felt when you received the paintings, because I'm thinking that our experiences here have been similar in some ways. We face similar challenges, and perhaps the paintings and the somewhat complicated feelings they evoke.
And Natalie doesn't really respond. She kind of like, once again, it's that look where she's just like kind of looking at him and then eventually saying, Mr. Drummond is waiting. So it's like this acknowledgement of from Milchich of the just like the absolute like horror that he quietly experienced seeing these like racist paintings given to him as a gift, and seeking some sort of solidarity in maybe the only person in the company, or at least the only person he knows in the company, who might have had a shared experience, and she either can't or won't talk about it. I think that's really hard, and I'm really glad that the scene exists. If we were going to go here in the first place to investigate the way in which the casual, thoughtless, careless way in which Milchich as a black man and Natalie as a woman of color, how they're treated by this company, and they're so ingrained in it that they can't even really talk about that without coming across as, oh, ungrateful, or people have been fired for much less at this company, certainly.
Yeah, and we talked about this a lot, and I think that it's such an important, I don't know, I think that I think some people thought that we were maybe overly reading into this scene, and I just don't think that we were. I think that it was the point of that scene, and is the point of this scene as well, to acknowledge that like these two have their own experience at this company that is like not well reflected in how the company is run. And I think that it's really interesting that Milchich, who is such a like by the book guy, is willing
taking
to
a chance here. Like, this is one of the biggest risks we've seen him take as far as his fidelity to Lumon is concerned, at the very least.
Yeah. And it speaks to like the complexity of his inner life and his pain and his motivations, which we haven't really seen a lot of other material that speaks to that he seems to really yearn to connect with Natalie about this experience. And, he mentions, we face similar challenges, suggesting that this is more than just the paintings, that paintings is not the first, racist injury that he might have endured as part of his tenure at Lumon. It's not at all surprising that a company that is this old, that is so based on lineage and a particular white family would have a race problem.
Yeah.
We talked about, there's a lot of war and civil war, themes that play in certain names of files and other details of the show. So this was really, I think, powerful. And Tremel Tillman plays throughout this episode, I think, a kind of stoicism and deep sadness that he can't really express and acknowledge because of how damaging it would be to his standing at Lumon. And we don't understand yet what that means in the context of the whole rest of his life. So tremendous work there. And then in Natalie's response, I think, tension that suggests that maybe she might connect to what he's saying, or at least understand what he's talking about, but not feel at liberty to even acknowledge that.
Yeah. Briefly, we cut away from this for Dylan to satisfy the hang in there prophecy. He's the last guy at the funeral. He says goodbye. He turns around and he sees the poster. And in the poster is a note plus the illustration of the elevator. Did either of you read the note? Could you read the note? I couldn't read everything.
I took a picture of it and I did look. It's directions. It's like, go down this hallway, make a left, make a right. Like I didn't.
It starts, from Dad, all in caps, which I thought was sort of interesting. I was like, is this an Irving's Hey Kids kind of reference?
Oh.
And then, it's basically first turn right all the way down the hall and turn right, turn left down a long hall. And then it's basically just like this
left, right, left,
right. Bunch of left, rights all the way down a long hallway. And then the picture on the other side is of that down elevator. So it's seemingly directions to this hallway.
So this strikes me as, did he get this from his interactions with Felicia? Like, did she help?
I assume so.
Help him draw a map?
I think so.
So, okay. Irving, not alive and well on the severed floor, but his instructions are at least.
The ghost of Dad is there.
Dylan puts Ghost Dad's note back behind the painting for safekeeping. Look, if it hadn't been found yet, may as well just put it right back. I think that's like some Survivor immunity idol type thing. I feel like it's like, I'm not going to take the Beware advantage.
You don't want to take that. It's a trap.
Performance review time. It could take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours, depending on the number of atonements and approbations required. There will be a lunch break with an order taken in advance. Here's the menu. The gifts, the positives are that he received the gift of Kier's paintings with grace. His attendance and his urinalysis are both in the excellent range. That's the end.
Milchich's not doping.
That's all the positives. All the positives.
Here, you did a great job accepting a gift, and you're not doing drugs.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
First of all, how often does Milchich get tested with urinalysis? Like, what a weird thing. But then also just the shade that this performance review starts with, where it's like, it could be anywhere from 2 to 6 hours, and Milchich's well, like, well, hopefully that's not. And he's like, here's the lunch menu. Like,
here's
it's gonna be a minute.
You're gonna want to order the lunch. I hope they got a good lunch.
Yeah,
I would have been psyched.
Some sort of hibiscus wrap, I think.
I'm assuming it's some sort of, like, I don't know, prepackaged sandwiches or something gross, but who knows.
Yeah, so Milchich uses too many big words. He also has misused the paper clips were installed from back to front, which led to confusion about where the document was to begin reading. But the bulk of the day will revolve around the following. You brought in a new refining team for Mark S, which failed to coalesce. You instituted kindness reform.
Yeah, because I'm not Harmony Cobell.
The kindness reforms seem to have in no way deterred curiosity and idling by the team when they returned. You arranged an outdoor retreat and team building occurrence, which resulted in the termination of one employee and the discovery of the true identity of another at great risk and harm to the Egan name.
Yeah, performance review off to a rocky start.
Rocky start. Yeah, they're not. This is interesting, and I think that the fact that we've had a little bit of the race theme heavily in this season, this is feeling very much like they're setting up Milchich as the scapegoat for everything here, and they're throwing him under the bus hard. If things don't go right, he's going to be the one to take the fall. Drummond encourages him to go back to the basics, Seth. Remember these severed workers' greater purpose and treat them as what they really are.
Yeah. So cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice
And they
way to
make
treat
reference to the
them.
fact that Mark's work on Cold Harbor will be the greatest moment in the history of the planet.
Yeah,
which
it'll be
is-
among
Is this
the
like
greatest
the
moments.
tallest? It's like the tallest waterfall on the planet, though.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know the superlatives with them, not always tracking.
Yeah, but that suggests to me again like a person who believes their own hype. So I do think that like from that perspective, and every single time that we hear about Cold Harbor now, it is only heightened in importance. So either this is going to be a tremendous letdown for us, and it's going to be just like a shaggy dog story, which I actually tend to enjoy sometimes. So like if that's where we go, as long as it's executed well, or whatever it is that Mark is 85% of the way complete with Cold Harbor, matters a lot to the mythology of the show.
Yeah.
And is
I have
it
to
this
lodge a complaint
file-
though, because if
Go
we're
ahead.
85% done with Cold Harbor, then somebody's owed a music dance experience. That's at the 75% mark.
Yeah.
Mark,
Yeah.
That's a great,
Yeah.
that's a great point.
I did not see a music dance experience, so.
Yeah, my question is it like this file in particular? Was it just always the Cold Harbor file and everything else sort of been the build up to it? Or is it this is sort of the last file that needs to be completed? I just have so many questions.
This is a great question, and I hope that we get a lot of feedback and theories to discuss. Well, we'll peruse the Reddit because I think that the fact that Cold Harbor has become such a drumbeat of the season, and every time we learn about it, we get more of a sense that this really is the most important thing, if not the only important thing. I think that really opens up what exactly is Cold Harbor in particular, and why is Mark S. the only one who can do this.
Yeah, Mark S. Stands on the verge of one of the great moments in the history of the planet, which will take place under Milchich's stewardship. So it's like, do this, like get this done, and you are like a part of history. Fail this, and like your punishment, the extent of your punishment will know no bounds, I think is sort of the other piece of it, which is, I think, underneath at least why Milchich goes off on Mark, who also goes off on Milchich. So Mark, we go back, he's working on Cold Harbor, he gets a reintegration headache, so that's happening again for Innie Mark, and then he's gonna dip out on work 6 minutes early is where we have landed with Mark. It's like, wow, very very seen. He has this very close in his face conversation, and the two of them are not holding a ton back. Mark is Milchich says, hopefully now we can put all this grief and tumult behind us and look forward to productive times again. And Mark says, you mean putting the numbers in the thing? Putting the numbers in the thing. That's all it is for Mark F. It's refining. Whatever you say, Milchich, praise Kier. And so he's really snapping back with the tude, and then Milchich gets right up in his grill and behaves in a decidedly un-Milchich like fashion, I think, as he uses a short word to
Yeah.
large impact.
Four letters only. Yeah. Did you tell Heli that you effed her outie at the Ortbo? Helena Egan, leader in waiting at this company.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Milchich has said he's tightening the leash. The kinder, gentler Lumon was not getting results. He just got this negative performance review, and I think we're going to see a new Mr. Milchich. He doesn't always have to be nice. He sometimes uses the bad soap.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he should wash his mouth out with the bad soap.
Yeah,
With that language.
Yeah. It does
Did you
make me
tell
wonder.
Heli that you effed her outie at the Ortbo? Like, wow, that's a lot. That's
But like, how
wild.
does Milchich know? Did Helena tell him? Was this like always the plan, or was he just? Did he notice what was going on? Yeah.
Like, was it like just like the tent was a shaken?
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know.
Yeah.
When the tents are rocking, right? Yeah. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
And I think this is the end of our time in the severed floor, and the rest of the episode's events take place in the outie world, starting with Devin reading from the latest draft of Ricken's revised innie specific version of the UUR. We get some of this new text. The workers were diligent, focused on the task at hand. Pleasantly surprised, I noticed that not a single worker had a watch. They simply referenced a large standard clock above the door, just hands and numbers and cogs and purpose. Your sovereign boss may own the clock that greets you from the wall, but you get to enjoy its ticking and thus should be happy.
Devin's like, yo, so that's the exact opposite of what you've been writing to these people. Again, just to shout it out, we're gonna have a really good interview with the great Michael Chernus about this episode and about this scene in particular. I thought he had a lot of really insightful things to say about why Ricken might behave this way, and like the tension here, and even I think Chernus being like, Ricken, no, like I think like not wanting this to be the way things are
sold
going.
out. He sold out.
Yeah, but it's a Trojan's horse.
It's a Trojan's horse. You just get those ideas in there, and even if they're the exact opposite of your ideas, then somehow they'll be the good ideas. We talked a little in our interview with Michael, which is great, about how this is an analog to things that really happen when people go along with things that are anathema to their beliefs, but they do it because they believe if I go along with it, just being here, I can change it. I love what Devin, I love what Devin says in response to this. She says, Lumon hurts people. You know that. And if you want to water down your work so that they can use it for their propaganda, then you're hurting people too.
Yeah.
She just calls it out.
Good on Devin for speaking to this. But yeah, I think it's so interesting, and I think it's such an interesting commentary on all of the how many times people have tried to work within the system in order to bring it down, and how tough that can be.
Yeah. And this is also a fiscal and creative opportunity, unlike any Ricken has yet seen. He mentions, unless me selling millions of copies of my books and the life that manages to give us has somehow lost its appeal for you. Devin just says, whatever, I'm going to bed.
She hates that comment. That comment is like a real like, oh, wow. Okay. I am not engaging with that anymore. No, thank you, I believe is what she says. An appropriate reaction. Ricken floundering and not excited to see where this goes.
Yeah. And there's much more of this in our conversation with Michael, but I think it's just one of the consistent things we've known about Ricken is how much he wants to be appreciated and respected, and he wants his ideas to be important and to matter. And if you read or listen to the UUR first 8 chapters that were released by Apple, there's more that speaks to those themes, and that this is somebody telling him, your ideas are great. This is so good. You've inspired people. You've opened up their minds, and it's everything that he's ever wanted to be. And Natalie is offering him this opportunity to benefit from that. And she's feeding him exactly what he craves. And so it's not at all surprising that he would be susceptible to this.
Yeah. So that's what's going on with Ricken and Devin. And look, he's still here. That's Irving. Irving is
That's
alive.
our guy. That's our guy.
Yeah.
I give some F's about Outie Irving.
How many dry F's?
I give at least 2 dry F's about Outie Irving.
Should we be rating every episode with like the number of dry out of like 5 dry F's?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's got
Irving
2 dry F's and cares about Irving? This guy.
Irving's taking down his paintings. I think that like this suggests that they've served their purpose and maybe he doesn't have to do this anymore. But we see him walk out again to the phone booth to make a call. It's me again. So they fired me. I think they knew what my innie was up to. I'm telling you to, but the call he has to end. He says, I have to go because he notices Burt is stalking him in his car, and he walks over to approach him. Burt says very understandably, I've got this thing. When somebody shows up on my doorstep screaming my name, I want to know why. Call it a quirk.
Call it a quirk. He recognizes him as far as a fellow traveler in the severed process. And he gives us some context. He says, I got canned a couple of weeks ago. When I asked for a reason, they said my innie had an unsanctioned erotic entanglement with another worker, but they wouldn't tell me who.
Hot.
And then you show up at my door. And like you know what? Like the vibes between Outie Irving and Outie Burt are different than they are for innie Burt and innie Irving. But they are still kind of hot.
Yeah.
I think actually the innie vibes are cute. The Outie vibes are hot.
Yeah.
This is hot.
There's chemistry here between
there's
two.
this like sweet innocence to the innies that the Outies are just, they're a little more world weary. They're into it. I know this reference to Fields as the husband. I was like, this guy's gotta get gone. Like he's just standing in the way of what we
I
want.
already feel very loyal to Fields. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because his name is Fields, and the way that Christopher Walken just says Fields, just like so declaratively, like there's nothing strange about this at all. Like
maybe cancel their trip to Milwaukee, their romantic getaway to Milwaukee.
Burt and Fields, we got a ham. We're planning to have it tomorrow. They want him to come over to eat ham. They could talk it all through. Irving says, you and me, and then Burt says, and Fields. So I cannot wait for the ham dinner party. I think the ham dinner party is going to be better than the no dinner party for sure.
I can't wait for this. Burt also adds, we like red wine, expensive.
Yeah, so funny. But I thought this is very notable, right? So Burt says he got canned, right? He didn't retire.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I guess how I'm struggling maybe a tiny bit to square that with how his how his like farewell message went. His farewell message was like so celebratory. So like, did he not know he was like fired until after? Or I
imagine that he was fired and he was instructed to not let that on to the rest of his severed co-workers.
And maybe that's why he's so weird about it, where he's like, I'm sure you all meant a lot to me, even though I'll never know your names. The impact I'll feel greatly, but I'll never
I know
who
that
you
I
were.
had an unsanctioned erotic entanglement with one of you, but
I don't know who.
But
him getting fired and Irving not getting fired for that, also interesting to me and suggestive of the work that MDR is doing generally is of such importance. Whether or not that's just because like keeping Irving keeps Mark S happy, that might be enough, honestly, of like
that was
it's
my
keeping
thinking,
Mark stable, like so like if someone has to get fired, I guess whatever O&D is doing is less important than Irving literally existing there to not disrupt Mark. Fascinating.
Yeah.
In Mark's basement, we see Ragabi is gathering things that she will be using in future reintegration procedures. So there's yarn. We see a necklace. These are things that were Gemma's. Mark comes downstairs. Ragabi explains that she's looking for pressure points, things to rattle his memory. We see the box of Gemma's cremains, which is also very notable that her body in quotes was cremated. And Mark asks, how they, who is that in there? And Ragabi explains they know people at the morgue on the payroll like everyone else in Kier. Mark's still coughing, seems to be experiencing these consequences of reintegration. Ragabi asks if he's all right, and Mark is eager to get back to it. And as he leaves, he asks Ragabi seriously, are they hurting her? Referring to Gemma. And Ragabi says, I don't know. And this is when outie Mark experiences the most intense reintegration that we've seen him have to this point. He hears Miss Casey's voice. Your outie can parallel park in less than 20 seconds. Your outie can roller skate with grace. Your outie pays all of his gas and electric bills within 3 business days. Your outie listens to music while he is shaving, but not while showering. Outie Mark seems incredible. He can parallel park in 20 seconds and he pays all of his electric and gas bills within 3 days. What a catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a real find. He's a responsible adult.
Yeah.
He always gets 2 scoops of ice cream, but they have to be the same flavor.
And he once captured a butterfly. Yeah. It's so funny. I am a few thoughts here. Ragabi's a big fan of eggnog, apparently, but it's out of
I was
season.
wondering if there's some significant, like if the eggnog, I mean, is eggnog part of this viscous
Is that what he's
Oh!
drinking? Yeah.
Is that like an ingredient in making this, like, I don't know. It almost looks
maybe
like a
is he
bodily
maybe-
fluid that
is he
Dieter
maybe-
knows something about. I don't want to name it, but I can imagine eggnog being part of that concoction.
Medicinal eggnog.
Yeah.
I guess,
don't
is
know.
there any other kind?
Yeah, but and this reference to the morgue was very interesting because this like downward elevator feels very reminiscent, right? Like the morgue is always in the basement of the hospitals. I've been down there, and it's sort of one of those of like, is that where the downward elevator goes to a morgue like area of Lumon? And is that where the quote unquote dead people like Gemma and Petey are found? So yeah, it definitely very interesting.
Yeah. While
I-
he's hearing all of this, he's seeing this hallway. We see him walking down there. He opens a door and he sees the white Lumon hall. And then when he turns around, he sees the full face of Miss Casey.
Yeah. So if things are reintegrating, now Mark Scout has seen some of what Mark S has seen and truly with his own eyes is looking at, the ghost of his wife that apparently is not a ghost, but is real. So I think it's some like an uncharitable read of the ending is like, this was just how it ended a couple episodes ago. But I still think that like the escalation of the reintegration and Mark Scout seeing is believing. And I think seeing Gemma in that context, I feel like is really going to activate him in ways that I hope like the speed and energy with which he's going to want to go after all of this stuff. I just hope that reintegration is up to snuff to follow and keep pace.
Yeah, and there are now a couple outies who kind of know what this hallway looks like, right? With outie Irving as well. So is there some potential for the two of them to connect over this at all?
Yeah. I mean, this is exciting because now we have Burt and Irving together on the outside. We've seen evidence that outie Irving has quite a bit of knowledge, probably more knowledge about what's going on at Lumon than we even know yet. Mark's reintegration is hastening. Incredible acting by Adam Scott, this final scene where we just see his face with all of the sadness and confusion, I thought was really, really powerful. I agree that, I saw some gripes that the Ortbo Woes Hollow episode felt like a bit of a momentum killer in terms of the reintegration plot. And in this episode, we just get a little bit of reintegration. Like we're still kind of just warming up with that. So I'm eager to see quite a bit more of that in the next episode. But this episode was really meaty in terms of all of the stuff with Milchich, the stuff with Heli coming back on the severed floor. And Dylan getting this very important information about the exports hall.
Boomeranging it back around to the top of the pod then, Amanda, what elements of this episode didn't work that well for you? Some of the directions that the show might be taking us moving forward.
So to give my honest performance of Alan, first of all,
please.
Your analysis and attendance, I have to say, they're in the exceptional range. But
I think you got the wrong results, but okay. All right.
One thing about this whole season so far that I've been struggling a little bit with is that as the world of Kier and Severance gets fleshed out more and seems more and more bizarre, and the mystery seems more and more consequential, there's something about the clarity of, I thought, was the social commentary at the focus of season 1 that is a little bit lost in the shuffle for me, which was this very clear, focused idea that people get abused at work for all of these reasons. And that's clearly still there. But as the show kind of builds out this world, and this has to do with maybe immortality and weird twins, and Lumon is, the outside world is more and more bizarre. I feel like that part of what was very appealing to me about the show might be a little bit diluted in all of those other elements. And I say this very tentatively because I think that this is a beautiful, exceptional show, and I'm still enjoying it very much. And I recognize that that's there. And I think that this could come together in a way that brings that to the fore. But there's a little bit of that feels like maybe it's getting lost. And I think part of it is also coming from the fact that this is such a hit for Apple. And this is Apple is such a mega corporation. And now I hear Adam Scott doing ad reads for insurance companies and workplace management software. And so the line between what is biting satire and what is kind of getting washed out, I feel a little bit like I'm reading maybe Ricken's Revised sometimes. And this is very gently and very lovingly that I'm saying this, but it's just something that I have to admit has been bubbling into my consciousness. And we did get tagged on Blue Sky by somebody who, and I can't pull this up this quickly, but somebody who was making the comment that they were struggling with just how big and commercial this is in the context of what feels like it's kind of this biting social commentary. Can both of those things exist?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense to me. And I feel you. It's every time I hear the ad read on the commercial of the workplace productivity, I'm just,
clearly
it's
you
so
aren't
icky
to this podcast. Our ad reads are insane.
Yeah.
I just did an ad read for Hitmen. To hire some.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I don't.
It depends who you mean,
Oh, sure.
if they're
Yeah.
if
We
they're
don't have to explore.
deployed properly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if they've got proper benefits, then maybe it's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's very kind of dystopian in that way, and I don't. And I think part of it is just that, like, everything that is going on in the world right now just makes this topic so exhausting that for it to feel at all watered down is like that is not the energy that we need in this moment. We need it to be the most that it can be. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the other point for me in this is that I think because we have 2 extra episodes this season, the pace of it feels just a little bit slower than, like, the rewatch of season 1. I was just like, how does all of this happen in one
Mhm.
episode of this show? And that kept being my take. And I don't think that that's going to be the takeaway from season 2. Like, the fact that we have hit the Mark must complete Cold Harbor point like 4 different times now, I'm like, I don't know that we needed to hear it over and over and
Mhm.
over again.
Mhm.
And so I do think that there is just, it's a little bit slower, a little bit more repetitive. We're not hitting it at quite the same kind of, by the time you see the twist coming, they've already revealed the twist sort
Mhm.
of pace, which is fine. And again, not to say that I'm not absolutely loving this and enjoying it very much, but yeah, it does feel maybe a bit like those extra 2 episodes have given them a little bit more time than I think they even needed, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
And then I also will say more Michael Chernus and more Patricia Arquette, please. I want
Yes,
more.
we've not had nearly enough of either of those characters. I hope to resolve that soon. The
Mhm.
other edge of this sword, I don't know if it's a double edge or like it's several edges to the
Wow.
sword. But of course, one of the edges at least is this show doesn't exist at all
Right.
without the framework within which we all exist. And
Yeah.
so,
Yep.
navigating that and finding your relationship with all of that is a very personal journey that we're all on right now. So, I don't have I cold harbor no ill will towards anyone who, like, that stuff is tough. But I think
Mhm.
in in uh in in true fashion, Severance is once again severancing at a very, like, opportune moment that I think
Yeah.
art reflecting life in a lot of ways. So that's our Severance 2 woke spiel, I think, or we know Severance 2 woke spiel for the day. Really excited for what we've got coming up. We've got Michael Chernus on the podcast for the next episode of We Know Severance. We will be back on the other side of that with a feedback and theories show. You've got time to send all of that in. Well, do it. What are you waiting for? Why haven't you done it yet? You should have already written by the time this podcast is over. Severance, RHAP at gmail.com. Severance, RHAP at gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast. We Know Severance, wherever you get your pods. You can go to weknowseverance.com for more information there. You can follow us on the internet. I'm at Round Howard. Melissa, where can people find you?
Yeah, Melissa Woodward 28, Whirlwind Pods on the internet. Check out everything that's going on over there. I recently recorded a podcast that won't be out probably for a couple months. So just a future dig for something really fun and new over on Whirlwind Podcast. So subscribe
Nice.
now so you don't miss out.
Time capsule pods?
Yeah, time release podcast.
Wow. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. That's a great new innovation. Love
Yeah.
Yeah.
that. Dr. Amanda, where can people find you?
People can find me over on the Blue Sky, where I am at Dr. Amanda R. And you can follow my other podcast, Crying Laughing. We are at Cry Laugh Pod. And we have been at the White Lotus. We've been revisiting season 1 and season 2 of the White Lotus, getting ready to jump into a brand new season airing February 17th, 16th,
16th.
whatever that Sunday is. We'll
It's
be
a very
covering
important Sunday in my world. Yes.
season 3. So look forward to all of that, and you can follow us in Crying Laughing Pod in your podcatcher of choice.
Yes. And a small upstart set of podcasters named Rob Sesternino and Josh Wigler will be competing directly with the Crying
Let's make it just like that. Let's
podcast as we will be covering the White Lotus here on We Know Scripted as well. Crossover episode will have to happen. We will have to make that happen, of course. We'll be back very soon with your friend and ours, the great Michael Chernus, on We Know Severance. We'll be back with the Theories and Feedback show shortly after that. And then at the end of next week, we'll be over the halfway line with episode 6 of season 2 of Severance. Until then, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.